Hello. Have you ever heard the saying, when the nation gets a cold, the Black community catches pneumonia? How about when it rains, it pours? Well, I'm here to tell you that there are ways that we can protect ourselves from life storms if we plan accordingly. Hi, I'm Marcy Myles-Clark. I'm a financial wellness strategist, speaker, author, consultant, and more. I provide education and resources to help others to understand the power of preparation and its impact on total well being. It is my mission to help others to properly plan for the unexpected, as there's a direct connection between being prepared and having peace of mind and total wellness, also known as WholeSum approach. As a 20-year healthpreneur who's overcome many of life's unexpected curveballs, I feel compelled to share the fruits of my personal life's experiences and professional expertise with you as a means of giving back and helping you to eliminate many pitfalls that often hold us back. It is my belief that God delivers us through situations so that we can be a blessing to others. I stand here today to share some of the resources which have helped us through. Let's talk about the importance of preparation formula. This simply means preparation builds confidence. Confidence leads to success and results, which equals peace of mind. For example, let's look at a student who studied for the exam and then feeling very well prepared during the test time. They feel much more confident and more likely to succeed and have peace of mind. This is the same for the actor who studies their lines before the performance and the athlete who practices his plays before the big game. Again, preparation builds confidence, which leads to success and ultimately peace of mind. Now, it's probably no surprise that research shows that anxiety levels hit an all-time high during the COVID-19 pandemic. People had not planned or prepared for the unexpected, thereby triggering overwhelming amounts of physical, emotional, and financial grief. As the US worked to reopen and resume normalcy, we saw more of a shift from the physical impacts of COVID-19 to the long-term mental and emotional impacts of the pandemic, which still plague us today, unfortunately. People are now desperately searching to find their long-lost peace of mind. Wouldn't you agree? I personally experienced one of the most traumatic periods of my adult life when me and my husband, T, mysteriously contracted COVID-19 back in March of 2020. Before this, we were your typical fun, loving, empty nester couple, just living our lives to the fullest. Then, in the blink of an eye, life for us changed drastically. I was a healthy 47-year-old, mildly affected by COVID-19. However, my husband, T, a healthy 56-year-old, unfortunately became deathly ill. T spent 46 days fighting for his life, including 28 days on the ventilator in a medically induced coma as Johns Hopkins' sickest COVID-19 patient. T was isolated from our family due to the COVID-19 lockdown at that time. He experienced several life-threatening episodes where I was told to prepare myself and our family for the worst. Could you imagine? Well, during this time, I did what I knew best. I deployed various spiritual and practical financial resources to successfully navigate myself and my family through one of the toughest times in recent history. For this discussion, we're going to revisit the good financial and practical resources utilized during this traumatic period of time to help achieve peace of mind. The key to being able to deploy resources when needed is proactively implementing them before you need them. Again, remember our importance of preparation formula. So some of the good practical and financial resources that we proactively implemented before we needed them included: number one, having a personal relationship with a personal physician. Number two, establishing asset protection, including all health and living insurances. That's your health and disability, long-term care plans, all life insurances, whole, final, burial policies, you name it. Number three, having a good estate plan, which includes securing the right documentation, including power of attorney, living and last wills, trusts, etc., in place. It's absolutely crucial now more than ever to have these resources in place as we live in a world full of unknowns. These key resources proved to be lifesavers for us during our toughest season And we're now teaching others the importance of having these tools so that they too can win when faced with uncertainty. Now, as a long-time family caregiver and veteran healthcare professional, I know firsthand the importance of having and leveraging relationships with personal physicians. So it was our relationship with T's physician which saved his life. T's physician urged and made arrangements for us to go to the ER for an emergency CAT scan of his lungs. It was determined that he was in lung failure and needed an emergency intubation less than 1 hour prior to arrival, which ended up saving his life. If T had to wait in the ER and navigate through the normal ER channels, he may not have survived. Additionally, early on in the pandemic, COVID-19 testing and treatment was only available with a physician referral. This ended up being a detriment for many who didn't have health insurance or relationship with a physician to advocate for them, which is further reason for having health medical insurance and a personal physician. Now, as a life and health insurance consultant, I know the importance of having both living and death insurances in place. Disability and long-term care insurances are examples of necessary living insurances. Disability is necessary to replace income in event of a sickness or disability. T's sickness was totally unexpected, and he was out of work for 6 months. Disability insurance and personal savings can be the key to survival in these situations. A long-term care or LTC insurance is necessary to ensure proper nursing care in the home or in a facility when someone becomes incapacitated and unable to help themselves without assistance. Long-term care insurances can be extremely beneficial during sudden or chronic illnesses. My husband and I were very grateful for his long-term care policy, which allowed the ability to ensure proper in-home care after his 46-day hospital stay. COVID-19 had totally ravaged his body, and he was forced to completely rehabilitate for restoration for months. For the first few months of T's return home, he was unable to walk. He needed assistance with bathing, dressing, toileting, you name it, many of the things that we often take for granted. He was in many ways like a baby, but guess what? He was my baby. And fortunately, we had proactively purchased a long-term care policy a few years earlier, which would be our saving grace during this unforeseen life-changing event. We were able to secure an in-home aide to assist during this time, utilizing the extra $5,000 a month long-term care plan funds. Yes, we received $5,000 per month to help pay for his care. Having someone to assist with his care was a godsend. Caregivers, I'm sure you all can relate. We were extremely thankful and grateful for his long-term care plan. It literally saved our lives and gave us an extreme sense of peace of mind. Remember my opener about the nation catching a cold and the Black community getting pneumonia? Did you know that the Black community was amongst the hardest hit group affected by COVID in every way? Mentally, physically, financially. Many African Americans perished because they didn't have the resources to seek medical care. Many African American businesses folded because they didn't have the resources to stay afloat, while other races seemingly emerged unscathed by this unpredictable, life-changing pandemic. The differences in outcomes, family, amongst various ethnic groups is largely attributed to the differences in their planning and preparation practices. There were many people who were unprepared, who did not have the proper life, health insurance, and estate planning documents prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, many of the families of the sick and deceased were left in a financial pickle in addition to their loss, further increasing their anxiety and stress, many of which are still being felt today. I cannot overemphasize the importance of having all of the good resources, including estate planning and asset protection in place. Resources like insurance is something that you pray that you don't need to use, but like the church folks say, you're hallelujah happy that you had it when you needed it. As we close, I want to take this time to thank you all for listening to me today and allowing me to share my personal journey and professional resources to reiterate the importance of preparation for peace of mind. It's a great time to get prepared as we celebrate the beginning of a new year. For more information on these financial wellness strategies and services and to inquire about speaking engagements, please contact me directly by going to the website, which is coveryourassetsins.com, or you can use your phone to scan the QR code to take you directly there. Have a blessed day, family, and may your life be full of financial wellness and peace of mind. God bless. Like most children, I loved stories. I remember being a voracious reader, knocking out entire chapter books in one day. Toward the end of elementary school, I got hold of my parents' copy of Roots by Alex Haley. This took me a year to read because, well, it's scary for a child to read about another black child being stolen from his home in West Africa. And I needed several months to get past my nightmares and muster the courage to read further and discover Haley's stories of Kunta Kinte and his family that shed light on our passage to and persistence in this place, the US of A. Now, I was fortunate to grow up in a home filled with Black pride. I knew this as one story of Black people in America. It was not my defining narrative. My parents made sure I knew stories of Black inventors and businesswomen like Madam C.J. Walker, of Black artists and performers like Judith Jamison, and Black scholars and freedom fighters like Dr. Angela Davis, for whom my parents affectionately nicknamed me in high school. And that's a story for another day. As a teen, before I knew the term counter-narrative, I had committed to reading books about Black people and by Black authors. Maya Angelou's autobiographies, Toni Morrison's novels, Nikki Giovanni's poems. With each story, real and fictional, I learned about Black culture, Black women, Black community, and Black pride. And that's what I love about Black History Month, also known as Every Day. Whether you're watching a short commercial, attending a church program, or scrolling through your social media feed, you proudly celebrate who you are by adding stories of Black accomplishment and Black inspiration to your knowledge bank, your identity, and your narrative. Later in my adult years, I was introduced to two Black women storytellers who added to my understanding and imagination of what was and what could be. During my doctoral program, I enrolled in a course where I was introduced to Zora Neale Hurston, not as the novelist who I met in my earlier years, but as the cultural anthropologist who studied Black community. She embedded herself in communities across the African diaspora to study the people and their practices in places such as New Orleans, Haiti, and Jamaica. She transformed her careful research, composed of observations, notes, recordings, and reflections, into thoughtful stories we read and learn from today. Zora gave voice to people often unheard. She's famous for her use of dialect. She wrote as people spoke without cleaning it up or rephrasing it to be in the voice of her readers. Her writing showed such a respect for individuals and communities in that she not only honored what they said, but how they said it. And in a time where few Black women wrote for a living, Zora committed to her craft, writing stories both researched and imagined. She lived a life of highs and lows, and yet wrote until the last days of our life, sharing her voice with us. Later in life, I unapologetically embraced the audiobook, where I discovered Octavia Butler, an award-winning science fiction writer who's a MacArthur genius and has a Mars landing site named after her. I'm inspired by Octavia because she wrote from her perspective. Her characters, their communities, and their journeys through time and space make visible African American women and families, culture and history, struggle and hope. Octavia also wrote with imagination. Her creative genius combined time travel with slave narratives, integrated communities and species, and featured science in ways that prompt us to think about the sustainability of our people, systems, and environment. And like Zora, Octavia wrote consistently. To quote her, "Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. Habit will help you finish and polish your stories. Inspiration won't. Habit is persistence and practice." Zora and Octavia, Black women, committed storytellers, community change makers. They've inspired the stories I tell about myself and my community. A year ago, I thought, what if I build a community of professionals who work toward equitable outcomes in their spaces where they live, work, and play, and showcase their approaches and accomplishments? I pursued this for two reasons. One, to find my voice, and two, to amplify the voices of others. As a Black woman, I'm inundated with messages that depreciate the value of my contributions. I spend more time than necessary talking myself into sharing my equity-driven ideas that change people and places, because I'm worried whether someone will care or believe they're worth pursuing. Yet, like Zora, like Octavia, I speak up and tell my story. Because it is imperative that we see and hear from people who we relate to, talking about what matters most to them. Few Black women cut through the noise. Even when we say something that matters, we can still feel ignored or unheard. To amplify our voices, I invite Black women into my community, Remix EQ, to tell stories about how they center equity in their work, to bring attention to their approaches, to add to our knowledge bank a remix of examples, strategies, and tools that lead to more equitable outcomes within and across communities. Their storytelling helps us to connect to and visualize the important work they perform. It also enables us to learn from and with them about the experiences of the people and places they serve. Like Zora, these Black women seek to understand their communities first, whether defined by history or geography, race or gender, interest or profession. Like Dr. Nicole Pinkert, a professor at Northwestern University in Chicago, who studied the city's learning ecosystem to discover that the mayor is in fact the chief learning officer with influence over civic organizations. She used this community knowledge to partner with the library system and establish a youth STEM program near a free transfer point for students riding the L to and from school. Like Octavia, the work of these Black women has been informed by their perspectives and lived experiences. They reflect on their intersectional identities and experiences as Black women who bear witness to discrimination based on their personhood and circumstances. They share how it motivates them to advocate for those in their community and for those who face similar inequities. Like Kathleen Mayon, nurse practitioner and health researcher. She discovered that her uncle was receiving inadequate care for his cancer diagnosis. Today, she investigates big data to learn more about the experiences and outcomes of our most underrepresented oncology patients. Black women, fierce advocates, community change makers. With each story they tell, we learn about their pursuits of gender justice, equitable education, inclusive workspaces, economic justice, and health equity. We add to our understanding and imagination of what was and what could be. Thank you, Zora. Thank you, Octavia. Because of you, I'm a committed storyteller, creating the space for Black women to tell their stories about how they make the world a more just place. My name is Dr. Erika Tate, and I'm the founder of Blue Knowledge, a learning firm that advances equity in schools and communities. I'm also the host of Remixing Live, and I invite you to tune into my live interview show where I remix stories of professionals who inform and inspire us to make the world a more just place.
Hello, my name is Tammie Gathings. I am honored to be a part of this Black History Speaker Series. Thank you, first and foremost, to Black Speakers Network for considering me. Very honored to have this opportunity. I am a graduate of Mississippi State University. I have a bachelor's in English with a minor in history. I was the first girl in my family to graduate from college. And so I'm very cognizant of what that meant for people in my family who didn't even attend school or attended and didn't get a chance to graduate from high school. I'm an author, I'm an entrepreneur, and I am an advocate as well for many different causes. Today, I want to talk with you about my presentation entitled The Second Daughter of the Second Daughter. My mother is the second child of her mother, and I am the second child of my mother. And there's a myth that your second child is the one that has you pulling out your hair, that gets on your last good nerve, the troublemaker. And I embraced that. I embraced being a troublemaker. As John Lewis said, good trouble. But it didn't always seem so good in the beginning because I was unearthing as a child different truths about the society I lived in, myself, my family, the people that I loved, the people that I went to church with and everything. And as I was uncovering these things, I was constantly being told, no, you shouldn't say that. Leave that alone. Don't mess with that. Okay? And it was especially coming from other Black women who had carved out their places in society as it was down here in Mississippi. And they were getting along just fine, they felt. So why question it? At least not out loud anyway. We don't talk about it unless we're in the sewing circle or out in the garden, or when the ladies came over to cook Sunday dinner. These weren't conversations, and these weren't things that were being told or said out loud. I consider myself a protector of the legacy of all the Black women who came before me. Some who felt like they had something to say, but weren't safe to say it. Who had questions, but were honestly afraid of the answers. Black women in America have sacrificed and suffered for family and culture their entire time in this country. What have they gained? And what do we as a society owe them? I come from a place where as late as 1980, Blacks were still having the word Negro placed on their birth certificates. To walk through life with that designation, and it's the 21st century now, there's something stinging about that. Also, during the time when I was born, if you were unmarried, you were not allowed, rather, to place the man's name on the birth certificate. That gave a woman a burden, so to speak, in her community, in her church. And that led to many women doing things that were counter to their own well-being, but as well, it hurt their children. We've seen it portrayed in books, in movies, and so many Black women recognize that hurt when they see it on the screen, on the page. But deep down inside, they'll never tell anybody. That's my story too. The things that we have seen, the things that we have endured as Black women in America make us vulnerable for a myriad of health problems. I could give you a laundry list of the different things that the women in my family face, the things that were also passed down to me. They had the knowledge of certain things, but even once it came down through generation, and they learned more about their conditions, they learned more about why they were having the ailments that they had and what could be done, sometimes they just didn't go through with it. Knowledge is power, but only if it's applied. So to know that certain diseases run in my family, especially with women, was one thing. But for those women to actually act on those things that they knew, to go see the right specialist, to take the right approach in advocating for themselves and their own health, that's historical. Because I look into other research, and I also have anecdotes from other Black women who said, my mother, my granny, my sister, my nana was just like your people, was just like the women in your family. And the thing is, as I said, we have the knowledge now. But unfortunately, we have generations of women alive today in the 21st century who still do not act on those things because of what we have said for so many years. If you get a hysterectomy, you can't get a man. If you go and try to see about yourself, they're going to take your kids. If you have to stay in the hospital too long, you're going to lose your house. Who's going to take care of you? Who's going to want you? And having those things historically drilled into women's head over and over and over again, Black women specifically, reinforces those bad choices, reinforces those fears. I know too many women personally, Black women in my life, who said, well, when the kids get out of school, when my husband gets a better job, I can go and see about myself. And many times before they could ever get to those arbitrary points, they die. And those things that they were fighting for, the things that they were sacrificing for, many times still don't come to pass. So we as Black women, we got to take what we know and we got to use it. We have to. Our survival depends upon it, and not just our own personal survival, but the survival of us as a people in America. When we know we got to go, we owe it to all the other sacrificers and to all the other servants that came before us. We got to put what we know into action to save ourselves.
My name is Lindsey Vertner, mindset expert and professional speaker. I help high-achieving leaders to prioritize their self-care, self-worth, and self-discipline so that they can maximize their results and maximize their impact. Today, we are talking about self-care is not selfish and truly understanding the importance that self-care plays in our lives, especially as leaders. Now, self-care has been a hot topic in the media ever since the panini hit, and rightfully so, because it is crucial to the quality of life that we are creating. Self-care subconsciously impacts every single thing that we do, both in our personal and professional lives. It impacts our behaviors, how we think, and even our bodies. And here's the thing. Self-care isn't something that you just do only when you're sick or only when you're stressed or when you have the time. Self-care is taking an intentional and active role in creating a routine or a habit to preserving and protecting your health, your mental, emotional, and physical health, your overall well-being. And not only have I studied the impacts of self-care or the lack thereof, but I've also personally experienced it. You see, in May of 2007, I found myself waking up in complete darkness. I had no clue where I was. I went to move and I couldn't move. I went to call out and I couldn't speak. The only thing I could see was the moonlight shining through an unfamiliar window. And so in that moment, I start to panic because in my mind, I'm obviously tied up in some psycho's basement who's waiting to torture me because what other explanation could there be? And I start panicking and panicking. And eventually I panicked so much that I exhausted myself out to the point where I passed out. And the next time I woke up, I thought to myself, what a horrible nightmare. Only to slowly realize that I still didn't know where I was. I still couldn't see. I still couldn't speak. I still couldn't move. The only thing that had changed was now the sunlight was shining through that same window that I knew wasn't mine. But before I could panic again, I heard voices. And a blonde lady walks up to me and starts asking me questions. And I'm thinking that I'm answering her out loud, but in reality, the only noises coming out of my mouth were because there was a tube going down my throat, keeping me alive. Turns out this lady is my nurse, and she proceeds to tell me that an entire week earlier, on May 13, 2007, the car I was driving went off the opposite side of the highway, flipped multiple times before landing upside down. My head was pinned between the ground and the entire weight of the car on top of me. I was cut from the car and immediately pronounced brain dead on the scene. But they put me on a helicopter and lifeline me to a trauma hospital where again, I was pronounced brain dead upon arrival by a new set of medical professionals. But God, because despite that, they proceeded to do emergency surgeries anyway and only placed me on life support until my family could be contacted. So wait. You mean to tell me that one minute I'm minding my business driving home from visiting my mother on Mother's Day, to the next I'm waking up to being told that not only had I been brain dead for the past week, but amongst the long list of injuries, I was also paralyzed. Brain dead and paralyzed. I was grateful to be alive, but then started the recovery journey. And amongst the physical and emotional recovery that I had to endure, I also had to live up to the uninvited title of Miracle on the Highway, Miracle Woman, Walking Miracle. And here's the thing, I didn't feel good enough to be that person. And so in my strive to live up to that newfound title, I started to lack self-care in my life. I started to do all the things for all the people all the time. How many of you can relate to that? And even though I loved my life, there was stress from prioritizing everybody else but me. There was stress from putting everyone else's needs before mine. And I became overwhelmed. And here are some of the results that a lack of self-care can cause in your life. Not only do you lose energy and lose focus, but you don't have the physical capacity to be productive and really focus on what matters because your brain is so cluttered with everything else. It's hard to listen to your intuition and which direction you can go in because you don't have that sense of peace that self-care can give you. It increases the amount of migraines or headaches that you have, body and muscle tensions, body aches. It increases your risk for depression and anxiety. And all of those things increase your fatigue. You have fluctuating weight. It gives you sleep issues, maybe trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. You eat too much or too little. All of these are results of a lack of self-care. But oftentimes we dismiss it as, oh, I'm just stressed, not realizing that our lack of self-care is increasing our stress levels. And so what I want you to think about is there's something called cortisol that gets released in our bodies. And cortisol is good in short bursts. It's good for life-threatening situations. It activates our fight or flight system to get to safety. And then once we're in safety, it starts to dissolve away. But when we're living in a constant state of stress and overwhelm, then we're constantly releasing cortisol throughout our bodies, and that is not good for our physical health. It increases our chances for heart disease, high blood pressure, or high blood sugar. It weakens our immune system, so we find ourselves sick more often. So we're calling off of work. We are canceling meetings with clients. We are missing fun events with our friends and family because we're sick more often. All of these things can be a result of a lack of self-care. And studies have shown that down the line, you may think you're all right, but that time will catch up with you. And overall, you decrease your overall lifespan. And so I want us to reframe how we look at self-care. It's not something that we only do when we're sick or when we're stressed or when we have time. It is something that we must prioritize in our lives, not only for ourselves, but for every single person connected to us as well. We just talked about some of the personal impacts, but also for the people you serve. It's like giving them your leftovers with used utensils. If they're starving, it'll still nourish and feed them. But would you want someone's leftovers? You would want a nice full buffet of food that's the perfect temperature with clean utensils to have the maximum impact on your nourishment. So when you're lacking self-care, you are giving the world your leftovers. If you think you're doing an amazing job now, just think how much more impactful and meaningful you would be if you were operating from 100, serving a full plate of food versus on E, serving your leftovers. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. I'm going to say that again. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. Now, here are some of the benefits of self-care. It increases your emotional management, so you're able to come up with creative solutions to your problems. It increases your ability to be focused and productive, so you're more effective in your day-to-day task. It increases your resiliency, your self-awareness, your self-esteem, because you have a better sense of who you are, your purpose, and your meaning in life. Because when we're lacking self-care, it's easy for those areas to become crowded and cluttered with all of the noise. Self-care not only impacts you mentally, emotionally, and physically, but it also impacts the people that you serve. When you are prioritizing your self-care, then you are serving everyone connected to you at an optimal level. It is a positive ripple effect that happens in your life and in the lives of others. So we have to be intentional about prioritizing our self-care, not only for ourselves, but for the people we serve as well. And to help you do that, I have a free worksheet called How to Incorporate Self-Care to Maintain Your Sanity. Visit www.bit.ly/self-care for sanity. You see it right there on the screen. And then make sure you reach out to me on social media. You can find me on all platforms at Lindsey Vertner, LindseyVertner. Please share with me how you are going to incorporate self-care into your life today. Because remember, self-care is not selfish, and self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And you deserve to prioritize your self-care.
Hello, I'm Sgt Stephanie Shannon. I'm the founder and CEO of Michigan Women Veterans Empowerment. I'm also an author, a speaker, and a veterans advocate. I'm here to share with you on the topic of self-care is not selfish, but it's self-preservation. I want to share with you my journey of joining the Army. When I was back in about 19 years old, I used to see the advertisement of Be All You Can Be, join the U.S. Army. And I was like, wow, I can actually travel the world on Uncle Sam's tab and get college money and pursue a career in the military. I thought it was a great decision. And shortly after I joined the military, my unit was deployed 5 months later to Desert Storm Gulf War. We were based out of Daman Port in Saudi Arabia. I drove 14-ton tractor trailers, hauled Patriots, ammos, and missiles. I felt like I was doing such a great work for our country. And during that time of service, it wasn't that many women in our unit. And some of the things that began to happen were inappropriate. The military has guidelines and policies against sexual harassment, sexual assault, fraternization, things like that. So I figured with the military having those policies in place, I was safe. But throughout my time that I was in the Desert Storm War, I experienced very, very inappropriate things. And I didn't know at that time I was experiencing what they call MST, which is military sexual trauma. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in the military, and 50% of the victims are men. And there was no system of reporting. So at the time, I just endured what I was going through and felt as if I just want to make it home in one piece. But it was causing a lot of problems in my life, let alone being in a war zone. You had to protect yourself, what I call from friendly fire. Friendly fire is when someone that's in the same unit as you or someone that is your leader is inappropriately doing things to you that are not supposed to. So there's nothing you could really do. I would share it with my other comrades, and some of them were experiencing the same thing. So I figured, well, I'll just make it home and I'll be fine. By the time we got back to the States, I was different. I could tell I had trust issues. I was estranged from my family. I had sleep disorder, anxiety. I didn't trust people. I felt as Like I have a more uncomfortable sense of lack of safety. And for many years, I reached out to the VA and I asked them for help. But at that time, they didn't have any services for women veterans in regards to that. It's like, what's wrong with you? You have all your limbs, you have your faculties, you can function. What could possibly be wrong with you? But I knew something was wrong because I was having an inner turmoil or an inner storm within me. After going to school and getting a degree in psychology, I was analyzing myself like, wow, that's some of the things I do. The hypervigilance or the anxiety when I'm in a comfortable situation. So for many years, I tucked it down. I didn't even admit that I was a veteran because it wasn't anything I was proud of. And then the people I did share with it, they broke my trust and shared it with other people. For so many years, and I even worked as a social worker, I was told don't share that type of stuff because this is a sign of weakness. So I didn't really address the issue. I kept working, kept trying to take care of my family. I kept trying to do what I needed to do to put food on the table because who else would do it? It was all about me helping them. So for so many years, the neglecting of myself caused me to hit rock bottom. I actually became a homeless veteran. Yes, homeless. And it's possible to experience homelessness when you're taken off your job by your psychologist and letting you know you got to get off this position. I had actually a Black woman psychologist that was helping me. She said, you have to get out this job. And I said, how am I going to leave? I got to take care of my son. Who else is going to take care of me? So actually her taking me off my job and my long-term disability ran out. My benefits for unemployment ran out. I became a homeless veteran. Went through a very, very difficult time in my life, abusive marriage and whatnot. But actually becoming a homeless veteran was one of the best things that happened for me because I hit rock bottom. And the VA at this time offered what they called HUD-VASH voucher. And I applied for that, and me and my son received housing. And I was like, great, this is great. But still, I was without the money and resources I needed to continue to provide for my family. But at the time, I invested in mental health treatment. I invested in caring for myself, and I found my voice through journaling. So as African Americans, and stereotypically, and it's taboo, that is not our issue. As we know, the suicide rate went up 30%. And as we know, people are doing some things and their behavior, especially after the pandemic, has become real toxic because the mental health of people is not very healthy. It's not something that's going to automatically happen. So I decided to invest in myself in order to heal myself so I could have a better destiny. So I encourage anyone that's dealing with any type of mental health challenges or experience trauma in their life or some level of loss to reach out to some trusted source. Even though I reached out to people that I thought could help, I had to reach out to professionals. I reached out to people that could connect me to the sources. I shared my story and I invested in my mental health, even medication. Mental health or mental illness is not anything negative to look at. It's just like any other health condition. If you don't exercise your body and do not proper diet, you can easily fall what they call to a place of sickness and toxicity. Our ancestors didn't have the privilege of investing in mental health. We didn't have the privilege of going and getting the treatment and choosing our jobs and choosing what careers we want to go in. Most of the things we were forced into or we were blocked out from. But now it's 2023. And I feel that as African Americans, we need to honor our ancestors by taking care of ourselves. So I encourage anyone that's dealing with some type of depression or anxiety to seek out help and also be transparent and real with yourself and with others. And also what's important is to find your happy place. Some of the things that helped me heal was nature. I'm a gardener. I'm actually a Black farmer. I fell in love with farming. And I also do all kinds of things in the community for others. But know this, that everything starts with you. And if you're an able-bodied person and you're able to articulate, you can be the best advocate for yourself. So ask for what you need, seek the help, but also follow up and make sure you hold yourself accountable. No one's going to take care of you better than you. So I really believe it's important that you find your voice and be true to yourself. And anything that is not healthy for you, remove it. Remove it, look for better relationships. And that's what I had to do as I grew in my journey. As I got healthier, I believe you attract what you are. So as healthier people, and healthier people became in my life as I got healthier. And I believe this, hurt people hurt people. So often we project our pain upon other people, but a lot of it starts with us. So I encourage you in this time of Black History Month that you put yourself first, because self-care is not selfish, it's self-preservation. So check me out, look me up. My website is battlingthestormwithin.com. And I have another website, MyWomenVets.com. You could also find me on Facebook at Michigan Women Veterans Empowerment. In this hour, let's honor our ancestors by taking care of ourselves and speaking truth to power. Remember, self-care is not selfish, but it's self-preservation. God bless you.
What a tangle web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Most of us heard that saying in elementary school, right? Well, my grandma used to say, if you lie, you'll cheat, and if you cheat, you'll steal. In a bit, we're going to get into what's been stealing your joy and darkening your soul. I'm Artisha T. Bolding, and I motivate women and entrepreneurs to birth their business book or brand. I ensure you are no longer stuck in life, but thriving in success that's aligned with your passion and purpose. My life changed when I began to be mindful of the care my soul needed. The practice of soul care is a way of being that allows for maximum impact through focused application. And it starts with being honest with yourself. Sounds easy enough, but when we consider the implications of neglecting this simple action, it sheds light on the importance of the practice. Because when you lie or act dishonestly, you're initiating problems and a domino structure of complications which eventually run out of control. I'm only going to be with you for a few minutes today, but if you want to learn more about an amazing tool I developed to shift you from surviving to thriving, I'll give you an opportunity at the end of our talk to do that. Right during the pandemic that we're still waiting in, I founded Igniting Minds Coaching and launched ArtishaBolding.com. I've transformed women-owned and operated businesses all over the country. I also have 3 Amazon best-selling books. I'm a fur mom, and I just so happen to be married to the kindest, cutest math teacher ever. I'm grateful for the life I'm living right now. And like many of you, I have a lot going on. I wear many hats, as you just heard. And in thinking about how I became who I am, I set out on a journey into my Black history. And I began to dissect my former life. Peeling back the layers, I centered on an instance about 5 years ago when my world blew up. At the time, I was working 50 and 60 hours per week on a dusty, wretched construction site. I liked my house, I loved my clothes, but I hated my life. And I was no fan of my husband either at the time. In fact, I had divorce papers drawn up and was prepared to serve him. When out of nowhere, at the ripe old age of 38, I became gravely ill. From the fall of 2017 to the spring of 2018, I spent 26 days in the hospital. I slipped into a coma 3 times. I flatlined twice. I literally had one foot in the grave. And lying there in a hospital bed, all I could think about was, what will they say at my funeral? What kind of legacy am I leaving behind? It was saddening and sobering, and I decided that day in May, if I was spared, I would change. If instead of being zipped up or boxed up and carried out of there, if I was fortunate enough to step out of that hospital, I would do life differently. Thankfully, I did. And ever since, it has been my mission to make sure that no one ever feels the way I felt that day. I want you to experience real joy and fulfillment every day by caring for your soul. And if you like the sound of that, then stick around until the end, and I'll tell you more about how you can experience a game-changing shift in your life now. So what is success? I'm here to tell you the American dream is a lie. It's no dream at all. It's almost a nightmare, especially if you are Black in America. With all the craziness in the world, many of us are so focused on what we're losing that we lost sight of what is possible. And when we lose sight of hope and purpose, all kinds of dis-ease can present itself. For me, it was congestive heart failure and being hooked up to a ventilator. While Black is beautiful, bold, and brilliant, it is also riddled with trauma. So how do we protect our health and well-being while navigating life? Consistent soul care provides lasting mental and physical impact. It's why I sit here today not having to take 8 different medications and not having to rely on 24-hour oxygen support. Listen, we're in a toxic culture of distractions and busyness. Despite that, I love our culture's quips and colloquialisms like mind the business that pays you. In fact, one of our well-known activists here in Atlanta just shared 3 things we can do to have a good 2023. Stay in your lane, stay out of people's business, and stay out of people's face. Personally, I've been practicing that for a while, and it's working for me. Another is real talk. But we're not even real with ourselves most of the time. Let me tell you, 3 things I love are a good wig, a good lipstick, and a good Spanx. Okay? But one thing about it, when I go to take this hair off, to sit it on the dresser, to peel myself out of this Spank and wipe this junk off my face, I still love what I see looking at me in the mirror. I refuse to allow social media, the police, overly concerned citizens trying to monitor my Black being to make me feel lesser or to look at my natural self as lesser. Anything else is a tangled web we weave. And no one talks about how exhausting it is to pretend to be okay. Moving through your day while grieving, sad, angry, anxious, or depressed requires a lot of effort. And I'm all for maintaining a childlike sense of wonder when you can, but real talk, pretending is a lie. I'll give you an example. You think you're being a low-maintenance partner, but you're actually just afraid your partner won't show up to meet your needs. So you pretend to not have any. It's okay to require things from the people in your life. You're not too much. The tangled webs we weave. The triune brain model says there are 3 major brain structures that control 3 major aspects of human thought and behavior. No, I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV. So I'm going to use layman's terms. 3 major brain structures are human brain, lizard brain, and monkey brain. Human brain is the most advanced part of the brain, which allows for logical, emotionless thought, as well as delayed gratification. With this part of our brain, we're able to think through our emotions rather than just reacting. This is a good place to hang out. The lizard brain ensures survival. It's in charge of the 4 F's: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and, to keep it PG, mating. Lizard brain is always on the lookout for danger. So, could this explain the propensity that this part of our brain skips over the good and zeroes in on the one thing that could possibly become a problem? Is it possible that in the absence of any clear and present danger, we rummage through our mental files and create scenarios where something's wrong? Have we become emotional cutters? In this build-up, this trauma response, What is lending itself to the angry Black woman syndrome, the angry Black man trope? I won't pretend to have all of the answers, and I wouldn't have enough time today if I did, but I want you to spend some time unpacking these things. I have a helpful tool that I use with clients, and I'll let you know how to grab that at the end. Finally, there's monkey brain, and it controls our emotions and our basic responses to fear and desire. Because we have so many things going on at one time, when we multitask, we can easily find ourselves using our monkey brain, making mindless decisions that may end up causing serious problems with important tasks, or worse, important relationships. We might even find ourselves in amygdala hijack, which is that immediate, overwhelming, out of measure emotional response to a trigger, the flying off the handle that we talked about. I'm going to leave you with 3 quick tips to tame your monkey brain as a part of your soul care practice. 1, eliminate the noise. Turn away from the computer, turn off the phone, and create a calming environment. Number 2, breathe deeply. Bring awareness to your breath. Short, shallow breathing triggers the stress response. And number 3, get out of that self-erected cage. Aim for physical activity at least every 90 minutes in order to keep the circulation flowing and stress hormones in balance. Mindfulness, awareness, breathing, and truthfulness is the soul care that you need. This combo is going to be a game changer for you. And because you gave me your attention today and spent this entire time with me, I want to give you the opportunity to have a special ebook that I wrote called Peace Over Panic. It's going to be key in getting you through the hurdles that life is presenting us in this 3rd, 4th, 5th level of this pandemic and caring for your Black soul. So go to artishavolding.com to the contact section and put in Black Speakers Network gift, and I'll make sure that you get your very own copy.
There are still Black firsts in 2022. And you ask yourself, how is this possible? How have we come to a point in the 21st century where there are still firsts? We get excited when we hear about Mellody Hobson being the first equity partner in the NFL. We love to know that there's finally a GM in the NHL in the name of Mike Greer. Even excited to know that there's a captain over in Little Rock named Quatisha Wilson. That's exciting. More exciting that there is finally a chief of police in the Arsola, Texas area named Erika Carr. We even are excited to know and shocked at the same time, right? That there is Aaliyah Griffin, who earned a degree in marine sciences at the University of North Carolina. And she's the first African American to have ever done so. And probably one of the most shocking and exciting all the same to know that Claudine Gay is the first African American president of the Harvard University. But let's talk about that. First, in 2022, we sang the songs, "We Shall Overcome." We saw our voting rights given. We've seen our civil rights added. We've seen desegregation of schools. We've seen desegregation of workplaces. We've seen desegregation of shopping centers and stores and cafes and all of these things decades ago. The people who fought for these things are gone on to glory many years ago. But yet we're still making first. But what about those of us that aren't making first in such historic grand stages? What about those who are making first? Just the first person to be a director in your business. First Black person to have been hired at the executive level in your company. First Black female to have served in a role at the school. Yeah, those firsts are still happening. How do we navigate in those playing fields? See, because when you're the first, there's no level to plan for, right? There's no set or preset expectations because no one's ever done it. So walking through those pathways, you have to be careful. Not that you have to walk on eggshells, but you have to be cognizant that you now become the example that will be set for all that follow you. You have either set a path that blazed it, that leaves the door wide open for others to come through after you, or perhaps you perform poorly and you close the door behind you. I've seen that happen as well. What I want to talk to you today about is understanding that when you are a first of all, be confident in and of the reasons why you were chosen. Don't second guess yourself. Don't wonder, am I able? Am I capable? You were chosen for a reason in this season. So walk in it. The next thing that you have to be cognizant of is that all eyes are on you. Yes, you. You didn't ask for it, but when you're the first, it's gonna come. So how do you do that? With grace, humility, confidence, and find a strong confidant. Not at the workplace, but someone outside. Because there will be times when it is tough. Because there will be expectations that failure is not an option for you. Other races have done it and perhaps failed and still given another opportunity with another person of that same race. But unfortunately, I'm here to tell you, you're not going to be afforded that opportunity. Not saying you have to be perfect, but you know how they say we have to be faster, sharper, wiser? You're going to have to make sure that you are intentional about everything you do. Not saying that you won't have some failures, but try and learn as quickly as possible from your failures and move forward. Do not be hung up in any small setbacks. Make sure you make sound hires. Make sure you're bringing people on your team that not only you can trust, but who are capable of doing the work. This isn't a time for nepotism. This isn't a time for good old boy. We just don't have that luxury. We have to be great. Now, am I putting pressure on you? Yeah, because the pressure's going to be there. So understand that. Have an outlet to relax. Know when to turn off. Because it is a lot of pressure to be the first. Everybody's expecting on one hand that you're going to do poorly. And on another hand, you're the great hope that we have. How do you balance both of those things? On this hand, they're expecting me, sometimes plotting for me to fail. But on this side, so much is expected. But as we've always heard, to whom much is given, much is required. Yes, you will lose a lot of yourself during this time. But there is no legendary individual. There is no trailblazer. There is no civil rights person who did not give of themselves for the benefit of others. And though you might feel, I'm just a director in my business, what do you mean? How are you putting all this on me? I'm not Martin Luther King. I'm not Malcolm X. I'm not Gandhi. I'm not any of these great individuals who had to set paths for others to follow, but you are. Because you're the first. You'll always be remembered. Will it be good? Or will it be less favorable? It's your choice. Right? Know that you're always on. You don't have the opportunity to have an off-the-record conversation. Be cognizant of that. It's not saying that you have to be perfect at all times, but it is saying that you have to be conscious at all times. Never get too comfortable. Not with the people in your workplace. Get comfortable with those circle of people who you know and trust. So make sure that you have a circle, right? Make sure that you have people that you can go to just talk about it. And talk about it honestly. Don't try and be Superwoman. Don't try and be Superman. If it's hurting you, let someone know. Because one thing about being the first that you have to be conscious of is that your mental health will be at stake. There will be challenges on all fronts. Family members who feeling that you're not giving them enough. Significant others who feel that you're not paying enough attention to the relationship. Children who feel neglected. All of these things will be going on at the same time that you're trying to be the first. It's heavy, but it's not impossible. Because many have done it before you, right? You're just in a new venture right now that hasn't yet had a first. So if I leave nothing else with you, it's to understand that being a first is a phenomenal honor, something that you should embrace, enjoy, and completely take time to appreciate while you're in the moment, right? But it's also something that you never take for granted. Don't ever think that you've arrived. Always understand, easy is getting the job. Hard is keeping the job. I'll say it again. Easy is getting the job. Hard is keeping the job. So once you've gotten through the interview, the job offer is there. The way that you stay on board, stay humble, stay hungry, and make sure that you take care of your people. Stay humble, meaning never think that you're so much because you're the first. Because as quickly as you got it, you can lose it. Take care of your people is make sure that you respect all, from the top level position all the way to your custodial staff. Respect all, because you never know when you'll need them. And then make sure that you're cognizant, that you're humble in that season. You're not so great that you can't fall. You're not so smart that someone can't share something with you that will be beneficial for the greater good. So be open. Have a true open door policy. But celebrate, because you are a first. I hope you've gotten something from this. I hope that you'll want to know more. I'm Dawn Miller, and it's been a pleasure sharing with you. And keep on making us proud as a first.
My name is Dr. Movita Johnson-Harrell. I come from 5 generations of poverty and 5 generations of substance abuse. I am also a 5-time co-victim of homicide. On March 30th, 1975, I was 8 years old. I saw my father murdered. That led me to be very, very hypervigilant about violence. And July 1st, 1991, my only brother was murdered over a girl at 28 years old. So when I got married and I began to have children, it was very important for me to protect my children. I was very hypervigilant about violence, and I wound up getting clean in 1994 from an active drug and alcohol addiction to be able to provide the best life that I possibly could for my children. In the summer of 2007, my 2 sons were 14 and 16. I'm the mother of 4. They were 14 and 16, and they came into my bedroom and they said, "Mom, we know 9 boys murdered in our community." And I consoled my sons, and I promised them that I would do everything in my power to protect them. And when they left my room, I turned to my husband and I said, "It's time to go. My sons will not become statistics on the streets of Philadelphia." And less than 6 months later, I packed my family up and moved to Lansdowne, Delaware County, 20-block radius, dry town. You can't even buy a beer, and everybody knows everybody's dog's name. And I thought that we were safe. And on January 13, 2011, my 18-year-old son, Charles, my youngest child of 4, came into Philadelphia to pick up his sister. 2 young men walked up to the car that I had just bought my daughter and put 4 bullets in my baby because they thought he was someone else. And going through a 2-week trial, I found out that these 2 young men had been engaged in the foster care system. They had been in juvenile detention centers, and then later adult correctional facilities. They were 23 and 25 years old at the time. And the head homicide detective said to me, "Movita, while your son was a pure victim, these 2 young men were going to hurt somebody. We knew." So at that point, I looked at the detective and I said, so those two young men aren't the problem. You're the problem. I said, because you had them, you knew that they did not have the things that they needed to be successful, and you let them continue to spiral downward until they harmed someone and wound up in the carceral system. And at that point, I began to look at gun violence and homicide in a different lens, right? Through a different lens. And I began to see the profit for homicide. And I began on this journey to fight for our Black sons on both sides of the gun, because I understood that they were strange fruit. So when we think of strange fruit, we think of the Etta James song, and we think of Down South, where, you know, we see the images of young Black men hanging from trees with nooses around their neck. Well, don't think that just because we don't see those images on a daily basis that it is still not happening, because our children are still strange fruit. It's just in a different light. Right? And that's why I embarked upon this journey to fight for our Black sons on both sides of the gun, to keep them from the carceral system, out of jail, and then out of the cemetery. And as I embarked upon this, I sat in front of legislators and I begged them to do things about the gun violence pandemic that's occurring in Philadelphia and across this nation. And they would placate me as the mom of the dead kid, but nobody did anything. So as a result, I ran for office and became the first Muslim woman ever elected to the Pennsylvania state legislature. And I actually brought resources back to Pennsylvania for gun violence prevention. Because when you look at the problem of gun violence, it is a profitable business, right? So not only is mass incarceration a big business, but gun violence in itself is a big business. In Philadelphia alone, we are building multi-million-dollar trauma bays just for gun violence. We hire doctors, nurses, social workers, victim services. We hire judges, prosecutors, defenders, all for gun violence. And my fight has been that we do not need to create more victim services. We need to create less victims. We need to get in front of the problem and be more preventive. Well, through this journey, I've done some amazing work, and it was really devastating for me because I had one surviving son, my last son, Dante Johnson. On March 5th, my son went to California for a weekend trip, and he was shot and killed in a random drive-by. And this problem continues to be pervasive across this country, because as long as it's Black and brown men dying, then the problem isn't a problem, right? It's okay that we continue to not address the social determinants that lead to community violence. It's okay that we continue to disenfranchise and marginalize communities of color so that they continue to harm one another, because as long as they're harming one another, then that's okay. Right? Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Because Black children, just like any other children, have a constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In Philadelphia alone, 516 homicides in 2022, 1,791 non-fatal shootings in 2022. That's over 2,300 people shot in Philadelphia in 2022. 87% of those shootings were male. 77% of those shootings were Black. So we know it's a problem. We also know it's a problem for mass shootings that's happening typically in places like schools and clubs, any place that people gather, but it's more prevalent in communities of color. So while we continue to disinvest in communities of color, we continue to see the increase in gun violence in those communities. It's not rocket science that the communities that have the highest rates of poverty have the highest rates of also gun violence. So we all have to get on board, all hands on deck in addressing this problem. And we need to address the social determinants, including racism, social injustice, poverty, housing scarcity, food deserts, inadequate education. If you think of it, if you put rats in a cage and you deny them of the things that they need to be successful, they will start to eat one another. And we want to blame Black children for the problem that's going on in the Black community when the problem wasn't created in the community. And we're not even talking about the infiltration of guns that wound up in communities. Smith and Wesson ain't in the hood. So I continue to fight for Black liberation. I continue to fight for the rights of our children to have the rights that every other child in this nation has without even being asked, but we have to demand it. Because if we do not demand it, they will not get it. I am grateful to stand with the Black Speaker Network and Black History Month and every day in fighting for Black liberation and fighting for the empowerment of communities to help them be successful and rise above what this country has done to us. We can no longer look at the image of the 1930s and 40s of the Black man hanging from the tree in Philadelphia, in the South, and think that that is over. It is not over by a long shot. Our children are still considered strange fruit. Our children are still at risk on both sides of the gun. And it is our responsibility to make sure that they thrive. You can follow me. My YouTube page is at Movita215. My Instagram and Facebook is Movita Johnson Harrell. My Twitter is at MovitaJH. You can book me through my website, MovitaJohnsonHarrell.com, to speak on empowerment, addictions, gun violence prevention, and Black liberation. I look forward to seeing you this Black History Month and beyond, because we need to have a Black History Year. Thank you.